and I am a proud parent of Arush Raj. He is a junior at Carnegie. So today we have lined up three amazing speakers. So our first speaker is Perry Kalmus. Did I say your name right, Perry?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So from AKALA. And our second speaker is Tulasi Iyengar from Kagola classes. And our third speaker is our own Miss Galloway. All right. So I am going to introduce Perry today. And okay. So we are so excited to have Perry Kalmus. He's a co-founder of AKALA and Equity Access back again this school year. Perry is on a mission to level the playing field in access to college admission guidance. Perry is one of the most sought after education consultants in the world, having helped the children of celebrities, Fortune 500 CEOs, and international business tycoons. AKALA has worked with over 15,000 families. A few years ago, they realized that they weren't doing anything to help close this massive gap in guidance, so they created Equity in Access as well as AKALA platform to help all families gain access to this kind of critical guidance. Perry is one of the stars of the Netflix documentary Operation Varsity Blues. I should note he's on the ethical side. Okay, so we are excited to have Perry. Please, Perry, go ahead and take over. Sorry. Before I say, I'll let Perry speak. Please go ahead, and if you have any questions, put in the chat box after Perry is done, and he will answer as many questions as he can, and that goes with all the other speakers as well.
And just so I could keep my own timer, do I have 22 minutes? Is that right?
Yes, that's about right. Yes.
Okay, cool. And also I brought a special guest, Barbara Kalmus, my co-founder. She's also one of the top consultants in the world. She actually started this company back in 1994 in Princeton, New Jersey. So we're gonna tag team this as fast as we can about the college essay. So let me share my screen. Cool. So Veena hit on all of this great stuff. We're also backed by, just as an extra piece, we're also backed by some of the biggest names in education, from Google to USC out here in Los Angeles, and GSV among several others. So okay, so the college essay challenges. We're going to start with the challenges that you have ahead, and then we're going to talk about how best you can go about thinking about the essay. For those of you, I see a few seniors on here, a lot of younger folks. For those of you who are seniors, obviously you want to take what you've done so far. For those of you who are younger, you could be thinking about the kinds of things you can do, extracurriculars, community service, summer experience, that might be able to lead towards the type of story that we're about to describe to you. So let's start with some things you want to avoid in the college essay, right? Especially for your big personal statement. Just a quick thing for those who don't know, you're going to have your big personal statement, and then you're going to have these small supplemental essays. So we're going to largely focus on the personal statement, although we'll touch on the supplementals as well. So the way I like to talk about the essay is, you're really trying to land a plane. It's a very large plane on a very narrow runway between the two extremes of cliche and trying too hard. Okay. Some examples of cliche are, and after this experience, I realized that I need to be the change I want to see in the world, right? And so I learned I have to seize the day, right? These kinds of cliched lines are generally, we want to try and avoid those. By the way, everything I say is like on the aggregate, right? At the margins, there's always exceptions to the rule, where sometimes being cliche can be okay. But by and large, I would say try and avoid it. And then trying too hard. I literally had a student this year, I never have to go far back to prove a point, who came to me and said, Perry, I want to say that I'm like tiramisu. And I cut him off and I said, Rohan, let me ask you a question. When was the last time you had tiramisu? And before you answer that, if the answer wasn't last night and also for the 200 out of the last 300 nights, and it's your favorite dessert, it's all you love to eat, then we're not writing about tiramisu, right? That's an example of someone who's just trying too hard to force a square peg into a round hole. Barbara always talks about this one. People love, there's a famous thing online, and we're going to talk about avoiding the online stuff, about an essay that said, I'm a pencil, not an eraser, right? These kinds of things generally I would try and avoid because they're very high risk, right? And I would say most of them don't end up working out. Every now and then you can, again, on the margins, you can make it work, but I would avoid it. Another thing to avoid the been there, done that, okay? For those of you who are doing extracurriculars like sports, and by the way, just to be clear, we're not poo-pooing any of these extracurriculars. I was an athlete. I played college soccer. No one supports sports more than I do. I love these clubs: debate, model Congress, model UN, robotics, mock trial. They're fantastic, but so many kids in America are doing these things. The orchestra is another one. Try not to write about those activities. I mean, every now and then, again, on the margins, you might be able to find a very interesting, unique story that they haven't heard before. But by and large, they've heard it all before regarding, the time that you guys were losing and then you came back and won, or the time that you lost and you learned so much from the failure. And they just have heard all that before, and they generally want to hear something else.
Harry, let me just jump in here for
yeah.
a second, because I just want to acknowledge here, everybody's story is their unique, authentic story. And if in fact you miss the penalty kick and your team lost, that is an incredibly meaningful moment for you. And maybe it taught you a lot of lessons, and maybe it taught your teammates a lot of lessons. And we don't want to belittle that story. The problem is that the people who are reading these essays have been reading hundreds and thousands of essays. And they get an essay like that and they go, oh, another one. It's a problem. Okay. I don't think that they're necessarily right, because it means that you can't necessarily tell an authentic story that's meaningful to you. And that is a problem. And we're acknowledging that. So we don't want to diminish or demean the experiences that you've had. Okay. But the warning is, when the people are sitting there and reading them, and now it's the 100th essay on missing the penalty kick, it's like, oh, here's another one. And that's the reaction. So I just want to kind of temper that a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. To be clear, we love a lot of these activities. I think there's so many amazing life lessons that you can learn from debate and model Congress and all these things. But as Barbara said, the numbers are just insane. The number of kids doing these things. Sports is, upwards of 2 million kids, 2 million seniors a year are playing sports. So that's why they generally don't want to hear about those. But Barbara and I, we love those activities, and they're nice to have on your resume. Next thing to avoid: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. This essay got me into Harvard, right? Please avoid listening to these videos, okay? The one thing that 0 of these videos will ever tell you is, oh, and I also had a 1600 on my SAT. I had a perfect GPA. I, was a part of a publication that broke a record for some sort of science. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up right now. But they don't tell you about all, my parents were alumni of the school. I was a recruited musician, athlete, artist, whatever. They don't tell you any of that. They just read you these essays. And so please, 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 please avoid reading these or listening to these. When you try and mimic what's already out there, then you're playing back into the game of been there, done that. We've already seen this. You can't tell us that I'm a pencil, not an eraser. They've already gotten 100 of those. So please avoid listening to those. I beg of thee, although I know no one ever listens to me on that, but please try it if you can.
Yeah, well, just to add to that, there are a lot of books out there, the top 100 essays. Even universities publish sometimes essays that they thought were amazing. The problem there is that when teenagers read these, they no longer can differentiate their story from what they read. And very often they start writing someone else's story because it was so cool, but it wasn't their story. And they're not doing this on purpose, okay? There's nothing, nefarious going on here in the kids' minds. But when you let them read essays that have been published in books and you let them go online or listen to TikToks, they then think that they now have this original story. They don't realize it's an essay that they actually had read in a book. Okay, so that's the warning on that. Okay.
This is just my humorous dump the resume dump, guys. The college essay is not a place for you to just jump all over the map of your resume to let a college know what you've done. Now, it's not to say that you can't include some aspects of your resume, right? If it makes sense with the story that you're trying to tell. But I can't tell you how many times I've heard from a student that they were walking dogs and then they did research in a lab and then they played a sport and then they did this and then that and then this and then that. It makes no sense. It looks like you're trying to force your resume onto them. There are two places where they can see your resume. One is the activities list, where you're going to list on the application all the activities that you do. So don't feel a pressure to get it out into your essay. And then also a resume. A lot of schools allow you to actually upload a resume. So if you want to write a little more than what was in that activities list, do it there. As I said, if there are a couple of things, like I have a student right now who has done a 2 or 3 things in the politics realm. Her story's all about politics. Yeah, of course you can talk about those aspects, but she's not talking about the fact that she's a lacrosse player in her politics-driven essay, right? So please avoid the resume dump. That's a really big deal. Okay, Barb.
Okay. All right. So what I want you to do for a moment is take about 10 seconds because we have a really short amount of time. And I want you to look at these words. And these are all very positive qualities of human beings in general. And I want you to try to think, if you're a student, you're thinking for yourself, if you're a parent, about your own student. Imagine that you had to present your student at the table, because it's their turn now, to be presented to the admissions committee. You have about a minute and a half, maybe 2, to present that student before the discussion opens. All right, so what are the qualities that you want to convey about yourself or your parents about you that you feel, they feel, and you feel would sell you to the admissions committee? Okay. And so you can screenshot this, and I think you're taping this, and you can have a copy of this. But when you see these things, these are all adjectives. Okay. Adjectives are meaningless. Okay. Adjectives mean nothing. What means something is actions, verbs. So if you want to be seen as fearless, what have you done to tell your story that shows you're fearless? What activities back it up? If you're analytical, what have you done to show it? If you're influential, what have you done to show it? Okay. So it's fine to start here when you're thinking about writing your essay, to start here. How do I want to be portrayed to the admissions committee? And do I have a story to back it up? So I'm not just resume dumping, I'm not adjective dumping. Okay. So these are the kinds of words that you want to try to be thinking about. Do you have the story that makes sense? Okay.
So guys, the Common App essay, the Common App is going to be the application used probably the most as you apply to college. Sometimes schools have their own applications. There's also one called the Coalition app. But we're going to just focus here on the Common App because these essays will work for almost all. The Common App is going to ask you 7 questions, and you could pick one for your big personal statement. Just as a strategy, as you're starting to think about what you're going to write about. I think one of the things that families don't do often, and what we encourage families to do, is sit down as a family, go question by question, and come up with anything that you could use to answer that question. Okay? And we're going to talk, Barbara's going to talk in a second about where you can find those kinds of things. But anything, don't be held back. The one thing I always tell kids is that it is amazing to me how every year I run into kids who didn't think that something was that impressive. So they didn't even mention it to me. But only because I prodded further did they mention that thing to me. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second, that's your college essay. My favorite example is actually, I just spoke to a kid 2 hours ago, and he wanted to write this second one, the lessons from the obstacles we encounter can be fundamental. And he wanted to write this essay about how he failed his driver's test a few times. And I said to him, I was like, it's like, it's not that that's not an obstacle you're overcoming. It's just that think about who you're being compared to. There are kids applying who have one parent, another parent died, another parent's a drug addict, like kids who are coming from poverty, kids who are homeless. Like, failing your driver's test doesn't really sound so much of an obstacle at that point. And so I started prodding him, and it turned out that his parents were really upset with, I guess, their own parenting. And the kid, they felt like the kid was becoming way too comfortable, way too privileged, way too spoiled. And so they're from China, and they brought him to their friend's company, and he worked in a factory in China in the middle of summer. Basically a sweat factory. And the story he told me was insane. And I was like, buddy, where was that story? Like, that's your college application essay. And now he's writing it, and it's awesome. So what I always say is the exercise is go through each one of these questions, write down anything that might even potentially work in your life. And Barbara's going to talk in a second about where you can find those things. But you don't get to decide if it's good or bad. Make sure you get something, an input from an expert. You're welcome to reach out to us if it's your counselor at school, whoever has a lot of experience in this field, and find out, like, what's the right angle that I should take based on all of these things. And just to be clear, some of these will not be relevant to you, so you don't feel pressure to have an answer for each one. And some of them you might have 3 or 4 things that you could write about, but just jot them all down. And then my advice is go get some advice from an expert on what's the best angle to take. And Barbara will jump into where you can start to think about these ideas.
Right. And so if you take that list before of the adjectives, print it out, have it in front of you, read these essay topics. Okay. What can I show about myself? Because this is how I want to be defined through this topic. Where can I find my story? Here are just some ideas. Okay. Could come from a family story, could come from a hobby of yours, a passion, an internship, your cousins, who knows, okay? Your volunteer work, your interests, your teachers. These are all places that you have experiences in your past and in your everyday life. So think about them, okay? So print these 2 pages out, have them in front of you, along with the questions, and keep referencing them question by question, okay? And a last quick example, and I think we have about 30 seconds.
No, we have 6 minutes.
Oh, 6 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, speak slower then. Okay. So a really great example of, I did this with a student of mine, and he chose his adjectives, and he looked at this list, and he saw grandparent, and he started talking about how he's a straight STEM student. Everything about him screams STEM, but he's a pianist. And he was telling me about this experience he had with his grandfather, who has Alzheimer's, about when he was practicing a piece and playing, and his grandfather walked in, and what happened. And it was like, oh my God. And he had this realization that music was a way to calm his grandfather and to put a smile on his grandfather's face, because somehow in his grandfather's brain, he had this memory of music. And then I said to him, I said, well, what are you going to do about that? I said, how about going to an old age home, an Alzheimer's unit, a memory loss unit, and volunteering to play for the people? And he started to do that. And he started to describe the reactions and how people would walk in and what their reactions would be, and how that ignited his interest in cog sci going forward that he hadn't really thought about before. And it was all because he had these adjectives, he chose some that he liked, he saw the word grandparent, and, you know, that's what happened. Okay, so that's our advice. There are, Perry, do you have the slide? I know we were shortening it on the other places where you get to tell your story. Can you bring that up for a second? Okay, so you do get to tell your story through your personal statement, of course, okay? There are also supplemental questions. Every school has their own. There are some carryovers that you can already begin to prepare for, like number one, why the particular major you're putting down. Number two, why do you want to study at that particular school? And number three, why this major at that school are the very common supplemental questions. And also the community question. A lot of the schools today are adding, you know, what are you going to bring to our community? What are you going to bring from your life experience into our community that we may not know about you, or our community may not know? And this is a way they're trying to get around the Supreme Court ruling where they're no longer allowed to look at ethnic or racial background. So you get to describe a lot in these supplemental questions. In the activity descriptions, it's 150 characters. It doesn't seem like a lot. It isn't a lot. But if you handpick every single word precisely, you can actually say a whole lot in 150 characters. You get to tell part of your story through your honors and awards. And there's one other place, and many of you may not be aware of this, but on the application, there is a supplemental question. It's optional. You don't have to, you don't use it if you don't need it, where it's 250 words, where you get a chance. Is there anything else you want us to know? And this is where, you know, I have a student who in sophomore year had a D in pre-calc, and he's applying as a physics calc major, okay? And he had a D. That has to be explained. You can't have the university make up their own minds about what happened. So you do this in the optional essay. Extenuating circumstances. A parent died, or someone was ill, or something, and affected your performance. Or you've done an activity that you don't have 150 characters, you have 150 words, and you can use this to explain a little bit more. So those are 5 places where you get to tell your story.
Just real quick, last thing, I do want to get in about your the hook. Okay, we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but the hook with your essay is so important, guys. This is not your intro 3-body paragraph conclusion essay. This is a Hollywood essay. You need to entertain your the person reading it. As I always like to say, these guys are reading 300-400 applications a week. Imagine you are the 400th application. It's 4:50 p.m. on Friday. What are you going to write in those first few lines that's going to make, you're the only thing standing between me and a great fun weekend with my friends, my family, whatever. What are you going to write that's going to make me go, ah, this is why I did, this is why I do this job, right? It's a really important thing to think about. We're, of course, happy to help you brainstorm those kinds of things. I did want to just let you know, if you are interested, we are running a promo for CVHS people. If you're a senior, we're giving you 20% off the services. If you're younger, we work on our whole platform to help you organize your profile, extracurriculars, community service, summer experience. Feel free to reach out. And we also offer a free consultation, just totally free, no pressure to sign up. If you want to come scan this QR code, we're happy to set up a time with you and your kid and get answers specific to your child. And that's exactly 22 minutes. We did.
Okay, thank you so much. We hope we helped.
Thank you, Perry. Thank you, Barbara. That was so informative. Thank you, amazing job. Let me see if I have any questions in the chat. So out of
Yeah, I see that one about the possible prompts. Yeah. Out of the possible prompts, if there's one that's best, oh yeah, QR code, I'll put that back up there real quick. The one that's best to write about, the answer is no. Anything is amazing. You just want to try and find the most compelling story that you can tell for your, let me just put that QR code back up. The most compelling story that you can tell, and as Barbara noted there's so many different places that you can find that story. It doesn't have to be from your lane. If you're a chemist, if you're a computer scientist, whatever, you can just, any of those questions are great as long as you can tell it in a compelling way and you have that really fantastic hook that makes them perk their ears up and go, huh, I've never read that before. So
yeah, Perry, someone also asked about, they were told to avoid question number 7. Here's a warning, okay? Like, put your fingers in your ears, okay? If they didn't want you to write about question number 7, they wouldn't have it there. Sometimes when you read the prompts for supplemental essays, an idea will pop into your head that you hadn't even thought of before, okay? That doesn't exactly fit any of the 6 prompts, okay? But it actually, you could write it on the 7th and use your own title. So please don't limit yourself, okay? A number of years ago, William's prompt was, what do you see when you look out the window? It's a great prompt, okay? And some kids got so creative on how they answered that. That's not one of the 6 questions, but they could have used that question to answer as number 7. So yes, if they didn't want you to have a topic of your own, they wouldn't make it available. Okay?
yeah. And then someone wrote, best time to start writing or preparing. We're big fans of getting your writing process started in your junior year, because, you know, school questions like, why us? Why do you want to come to our school? That's not going to change between now and the next 6-7 months. You can start writing those answers now. And by forcing it out over the course of junior year, it allows you to de-stress this whole process and just write a little bit at a time. That adds up to a lot. I think a lot of the stress happens because most kids, as we're getting tons of phone calls, start calling us now, right? In late September of senior year, and they've got to write 30 essays in a matter of a month or 2. And so we're big fans of, you know, if you are a junior on this call, now's the time to get started writing. It just de-stresses the whole process and, dare I say, makes it not impactful on you at all. And that's the way we prefer it for our students.
Okay.
I think that was everything.
Yeah.
But we can hang around for a little. If anyone ends up asking more questions, we can.
Can you, Perry, put that slide where you had the price once again? So.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, and I just throw in here for a second. If your students come onto our platform, they are meeting with one of our counselors or with us every single month. So at the end of a year, they've had 12 meetings, 2 years, 24, 3 years, 36. So it's not just technology, it's actually meeting with a counselor who's keeping you on track and intervening where necessary to get you help if you need it, to answer any questions you have or your parents have, if you're a student on here. So it's not just a platform where you put everything, it's a platform that also includes one-on-one mentoring.
Yeah, and my other bit of advice is just whether you use us is not a big deal, but like, please seek out someone who's got expertise in this field. Don't trust someone who you heard is a great writer or who somehow got into Harvard, or go to someone who's got experience in this field. There's a lot of things to avoid when you're writing and things to do when you're writing. And I think getting that expertise is really critical, especially if you're going for the hyper competitive schools.
All right. Thank you, Perry. Thank you, Barbara. We truly appreciate you guys coming over, taking this time. And I mean, you guys are amazing. You guys are doing such a great job. I hope, you know, I'm sure a lot of our students would help from you guys. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We so appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks again. All right. Please feel to stick around if we have a next speaker. So let me see. Tulsi, are you in there, kiddo?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Right. So let me just give a brief introduction for Tulsi. Tulsi is a second-year medical student at the UT Southwestern Medical School. She's a graduate of Vanderbilt University and has a degree in neuroscience. She has scored 99th to 100 percentile on SAT, ACT, and MCAT. She offers tutoring through KAGOLA classes for MCAT preparation, and she's going to talk a little bit about building a strong resume. Here you go, Tulsi.
Hello, everybody. It is so nice to speak to all of you. So, as we mentioned, so I work for KAGOLA classes. We're a tutoring company that specializes in AP, SAT, ACT test prep. And through that, I have built like a very strong resume, but there are really 5 key points that I think are very important for your student to be as ready as possible for college applications in terms of building their resume. I think the first thing that is often very overlooked is passion. A lot of times students who want to get into very competitive schools try to look at what other people have done before and try to replicate their success. But the trick to getting into these schools is not to be anybody else, it's to be yourself. And so I think the most important thing when it comes to deciding what's going on your resume and what sort of activities that you want to get involved in is passion. If you're not passionate about something, the interviewers, the people that are reading your essays, and the professors that you come across, they're all going to be able to tell. And we are at our best selves and we're at our most interesting selves when we're doing something that we're passionate about. When I applied to undergraduate institutions, I was very successful, but it wasn't because I decided to do everything the way that everyone else had done it. I just decided to do what I was passionate about. And at that moment, I was incredibly passionate about education. I was very passionate about performance arts, and I was very passionate about advocacy. And so I did my best to really convey those interests through my resume, but also because I was authentically interested in those things, it became much, much easier to be able to talk about it with passion. So for education, I helped tutor students K through 12 in math. And I also, after I'd taken my SAT and ACT, helped teach SAT and ACT prep courses. And so that really helped me understand kind of who I was as a teacher, but who I was as a student as well, and helped me develop a lot of experiences that really changed me as a person. I got to teach students who had neurodivergencies and very different backgrounds in terms of socioeconomic status. And so while I always had empathy, I was really able to really exercise that empathy with people that I may have never come across otherwise. When it came to performance arts, I've been dancing for a very, very long time. I do classical Indian dance, but I really wanted to explore it more. And so I continued dancing, but I also started choreographing, and I also started teaching alongside my teacher, which was really cool because I got to work with younger children and kind of like help them understand why people are so passionate about art and what makes art amazing. And once again, that was another entire group of society that I might not have otherwise been able to really interact with. In terms of advocacy, I used to work with adults that had developmental disabilities. And so that, again, access to a different population, it's really all about gaining perspective, and passion helps you gain perspective. I think something that was very interesting in my application, what was ultimately important in my undergraduate application, ultimately landed me a full ride to Vanderbilt, was my advocacy work that I did. And so I worked with local Asian American Pacific Islander community organizers to really address issues that were going on in the community, whether it came down to mutual aid post-Hurricane Harvey, or we were talking about getting more Asian American Pacific Islander citizens to vote. So again, all of those things are not necessarily something that your student has to do to get in, but those are things that were authentic to me and helped me really craft a resume that made sense for me and help me create my own personal brand. A lot of what's happening with applications nowadays is students kind of have a hard time understanding the narrative that they're supposed to put forth. But the narrative that they're supposed to put forth is really just them as a person. So helping create that 360 understanding of who they are as a person, as parents or as siblings or as community members, that's how you're best going to be able to help them put their best foot forward when it comes to applying to college. Another piece of advice that I would give is finding your niche. I think a lot of times, again, students get caught up in the checklist, whether that's volunteering with like the school's biggest volunteering organization. For my high school, it was Key Club, or just making sure that they get great grades, which, as much as that's amazing, that is the bare minimum nowadays. So they kind of spend so much time trying to check off everything on the checklist that they don't really explore who they are or what they want to do. And if they don't do those things, it's going to be very hard for them to set themselves apart from all the other students. These top schools are not looking for students that are necessarily going to do everything by the book. They're looking for students that will lead in the future, that will start very successful businesses, that will go on to cure hundreds of patients or go on to create wonderful art. All of these things take vision, discipline, and they take ambition. If your student can demonstrate those things, the things that they're passionate about, it's going to make this process a lot easier. I think, again, going with the theme of making sure that they're not checking things off a checklist, it's very important that your student does not box themselves in. I think a lot of times there's a sunk cost fallacy when kids start doing a certain activity. But if they're not interested in something, it's better that they find something that they're passionate about and interested in and can speak to very well. Because no experience that they have is really going to be an experience that's wasted. So it's important to kind of make sure that your student is doing things that they care about rather than doing things that they think will impress other people. And whatever they do, it's very important that they invest in that fully. If they're going to volunteer, but they're going to do it once a semester, it needs to be the best, 4 or 5 hours that they're going to do that entire semester. If they are going to go give a performance with their school choir, it needs to be the best performance that they've ever done. That is really just kind of like a cultivating discipline more than building your resume, but all these things help with the resume, which is just the end product. It's just a reflection of everything that they've done so far. So the resume doesn't necessarily need to be their North Star. The resume just needs to be a mirror for everything that they've worked on thus far. And I think the last thing that I wanted to share is a lot of times we as students are taught humility, which is a very, very, very important thing. It's just a little less important when it comes to college applications. So if you're trying to build a strong resume, you have to be your own biggest advocate. So whenever you're helping your student kind of brainstorm what to put on their resume, or whenever you're talking to them about just how they're talking about themselves, really make sure to cultivate kind of like a sense of pride in everything that they've done thus far. Remind them of how awesome they were when they worked on that research project, or remind them of how awesome they were when they put together like an event for volunteers. Because sometimes when you're in the thick of it, it's very, very hard to remember everything that you've done well. It's really easy to remember everything that's gone wrong. So just make sure that when they're writing their resume or when they're writing their application or when they're going to interviews, that they're proud of their applications, that they're not afraid to kind of brag on themselves, because they're all very impressive. That's why they've gone this far. And so hopefully with that, they're able to get even further. That's really all I have to share, but I would love to answer any questions that you have about the resume or just how that looks like on the Common App or anything like that.
Thank you, Tulsi. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time. I know you're a medical student at exams, and I appreciate you coming and giving your insight. Thank you. Let me see if you have any questions there. I don't see any questions. So yeah, do you have any slide that you could give them if they want to talk to you, or any information you have?
I can put our email in the chat. So if anybody wants to email us, they're more than welcome to reach out.
All right. Thank you so much, kiddo. I appreciate
Of
it.
course, have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. So the last speaker is our own Miss Galloway. We don't need any introduction to her, but I'm still going to talk a little bit. Miss Galloway, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Hi, Miss Galloway. Good seeing you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to go a little bit for about Miss Galloway. She's a college advisor for Carnegie Vanguard, DeBakey, and HSPBA. She's been with HISD for almost 5 years and have close to 7 years of college counseling advising experience. She has attended the University of Texas at San Antonio. Her undergrad, San Antonio for her undergrad experience, and the University of Houston for graduate school. She absolutely adores navigating the college admission process with students and families. So here we go. All right, Ms. Galloway, please take it over.
Yes, I don't necessarily have anything new to add from what a lot of the speakers spoke about. If anything, I felt like I was at open mic night. I was giving snaps for a lot of the insights that they were giving the students and parents. I just kind of want to piggyback off of a few things that were mentioned. A lot of times when I'm talking about the personal statement and the resume aspect of the college application process, oftentimes when colleges are reviewing you guys' applications, of course, they see an application from Common App. They see a transcript, they might see test scores, but with those things just alone, it's very black and white. There's a lot of gray matter, right? And so one way that you guys can bring a lot of color into the college application process is through your personal statement. And so if there are any seniors on the call, I read you guys' essays all the time. And so I genuinely enjoy reading them because it's an opportunity for me to know a little bit more about you outside of like GPA test scores and stuff like that. So your personal statement is your opportunity to tell your story, but it's also your opportunity to set yourself apart. So you just have to keep in mind that, yes, students at Carnegie have phenomenal GPAs, phenomenal test scores, but we also have to be mindful that there could be a student in, I don't know, Alaska, Minnesota, who can have those things as well. So trying to figure out like in what ways can I set myself apart? And so I think what's super important is the way in which you tell your story is super important. So they're reading tons of essays. I read tons of essays. And so it's super important to ensure that you're grabbing their attention. But also, if you're an avid reader like myself, vivid imagery is super important. As I'm reading, I want the picture to literally be described like in my mind or in my brain. So it's super important that you're telling a story and not necessarily listing everything that we can already see in your Common App application. This is your chance to talk about something outside of that. Also, I do want to say that your essays don't necessarily have to be a tearjerker, and so, or a trauma dump. We do have some students who may go through some very unfortunate things, but I don't want you guys to feel as if you have to find those things to talk about. I actually had a student who was like, I don't know what's right about my essay. I've never had anything bad happen to me. And that's great. And that's okay. But leading into my next point, I think sometimes with students, you guys are doing phenomenal things, but you may not think that they're necessarily important. And so whenever I start talking with you guys and we're brainstorming what you're going to talk about, you might just be talking, just things are flowing. And I'm like, wait, what did you just say there? That's what you've done. And so students don't think a lot of the things that they're doing are super important or that they're interesting, but they actually really are. I read an essay the other day. A student was talking about birding. I've never read an essay like that before. That's different. And so it's super important to find ways that you are setting yourselves apart. And then also, if you don't know what to write about, I usually start students off with a reflective exercise from Amherst. It's literally like maybe 30 questions. And I tell the student, you don't have to answer every single question, but maybe find a few questions that stick out to you and just free write, just write. And I guarantee you, we can find something that we can use for your personal statement. And it's usually pretty successful. And then the last thing that I kind of want to piggyback off of, when she was speaking about passion, passion is super important because that's what makes you authentic, right? And so if you're a student who's interested in long-term medical school, while it is important to ensure that you are participating in things that are related to that field, also a lot of the times colleges are interested in the things that aren't necessarily directly correlated to that. So for example, we have a student, crocheting is their thing. That's not a very common thing. That's something that maybe a lot of older people do, but she spoke about it in a way that was just different, and that you could tell she was passionate about it. So I'll just really do evaluate yourselves and kind of take inventory of a lot of things that you do and what you're passionate about. And oftentimes those are the things that colleges want to see, and that's what they're interested in. So you don't necessarily have to fit yourself in a box or mirror yourself to what you think they want to hear, but simply just tell your story. And oftentimes on paper, we can tell that you're being authentic because your passion will shine through. So I think all the speakers did a phenomenal job. And those are just things I kind of wanted to piggyback off of. And these are a lot of the things that I tell the seniors when we're meeting about essays and stuff like that. So yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Galloway.
Yes, thank you guys.
Yes, we truly appreciate you coming, all the speakers taking your time to come and talk to our students, and on behalf of all the PTO, I truly appreciate everybody. So let me just go and see if there's any more, if anybody have any more questions. No, I think we have such good speakers, like they did so good, and everybody talked about such good points that even myself, it's just give a lot of information to process and to advise our kids, and I'm sure the kids have got a lot of information too today. So I think that's about it for today.
Hey,
Anything?
Veena. Yeah, so I have a couple of announcements. So our college fair is on September 30th at HSPVA. So hopefully you all have seen that information. It is from 6 to 8 p.m. And it is for both CVHS and HSPVA. And there is a sign-up link, which which you might have already seen. We are all jointly organizing this event, so please do sign up. And next week, since this event is on Monday, we do not have a college readiness series next week. Okay, so the next session will be the following week. Thank you. Back to you, Veena.
I think that's about it, Mary. I think we've wrapped up. I don't see any more chats, and I think we did a very good, informative session today.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.